So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with My Hero Academia. So let's start the series. The air smelled of ozone and burning concrete, a scent Naruto Uzumaki knew too well. Not the clean, electrical ozone of a lightning jutsu, but something fouler, the byproduct of energy being ripped from biology without discipline. Below him, from his perch atop a fractured office building, the battle unfolded with the precise, televised choreography of a performance. Heroes in colorful costumes moved in practiced formations. Cameras mounted on drones circled like vultures. A villain, a man whose arms had mutated into crystalline growths that shot refracting beams of light, was being herded toward a designated containment zone, marked by holographic grids projected by support heroes. The civilian evacuation was orderly, funneled along pre-planned routes by heroes with cheerful, reassuring smiles. It was clean. It was professional. It was going to get people killed. Naruto's eyes, no longer the bright blue of his youth but the calm, weathered cerulean of a man who had seen the machinery of war, tracked the flow of chakra, or rather, the absence of it. He perceived the world through a different sense now. He saw not quirks, but the biological strain they exerted. The crystalline villain's heart was a frantic, overheating drumbeat in his sensory field. The lead hero, a man in sleek silver armor who called himself Mirror Shield, had a rigid, controlled physiology, but his quirk, deflecting energy, was creating micro-tears in his own connective tissue with every beam he bounced away. The man was counting on his pain being temporary, on medical teams being ready afterward. A child's whimper, high and thin, pierced through the distant roar of the spectacle. Naruto's head turned, his blonde hair, longer now and tied back, shifting in the acrid breeze. His gaze swept past the designated battle zone, past the cordons, to a half-collapsed residential complex not deemed, at risk, by the hero formation's calculations. His senses, honed in a world where shinobi listened for the hitch of breath behind a paper wall, found it. A life sign, small and terrified, trapped under shifting rubble in a basement apartment the evacuation had missed. Or overlooked. On the street below, Mirror Shield postured, broadcasting to the closest camera drone. Citizens, remain calm. We have the situation contained. This villain will be in custody within minutes. The crystalline man screamed, not in rage, but in a raw, panicked pain. Get away! I can't stop it. His quirk was misfiring, the beams growing more erratic, hotter. The heroes tightened their formation, preparing a synchronized takedown. They were following the manual. They were creating good visuals. Naruto moved. He did not run down the side of the building. He simply stepped off the edge and fell, his descent a controlled, vertical drop that bypassed the theatricality of a heroic leap. He landed in an alley between the battle and the residential complex, the impact a dull thud absorbed by bent knees, not a crater. He was dressed in simple, dark trousers and a muted orange jacket, the only remnant of his past life's palette, now practical and worn. He drew no attention. He reached the collapsed building in seconds, slipping through a crack in the foundation wall. The darkness was absolute, but his senses painted the interior for him. Stressed metal, precarious concrete slabs, the slow drip of severed pipes. And 30 feet in, under a crossbeam pinning a collapsed wall, the small, flickering life force of a boy no older than 5. Naruto placed his hands on the rubble. This required precision, not power. A careless application of force would bring the entire unstable structure down. He channeled chakra, not through flashy jutsu, but through the basic, foundational principles of tree walking. He spread his chakra through the debris, feeling its structure, finding the key pressure points. With a series of soft clicks and grinding shifts, he created a narrow, stable tunnel, redistributing weight along paths of lesser resistance. It was shinobi work. Sapper's work. The unglamorous art of saving lives without an audience. He found the boy curled in a pocket of dust, clutching a singed plush toy. Wide, tear-tracked eyes stared up at him, not with recognition of a hero's costume, but with pure, animal relief at the presence of another person. It's all right, Naruto said, his voice low and steady, a tone developed to calm civilians in burning villages. I'm getting you out. Can you move? The boy shook his head, pointing a trembling finger at his leg, pinned by a chunk of masonry. Naruto assessed it. Not crushed, but trapped. A quick pulse of chakra confirmed no major breaks. He braced his shoulder against the main beam, and with a slow, relentless exhale, lifted it just enough to slide the boy free. He gathered the child against his chest, shielding him with his body as he retraced his path through the makeshift tunnel. Behind them, the battle reached its crescendo. A brilliant, multicolored explosion of light, a combined hero attack, was followed by a shockwave that made the ruins tremble. Naruto tightened his grip on the boy and pushed forward. They emerged into the chaotic backwash of the event, the periphery where news vans idled and triage tents were being set up. A medical team in crisp uniforms spotted them and rushed over, taking the boy from Naruto's arms with practiced efficiency. Where did you come from? This area was cleared, one of them said, looking at Naruto's dust-covered, nondescript clothes with confusion. Naruto didn't answer. His eyes were on the main street, where the cheers had begun. Mirror's shield was holding up the unconscious, partially decrystallized villain in a victory pose. The camera drones closed in. The villain was zip-tied with quirk-suppressing cuffs, his head lolling. A clean capture. A successful operation. Then, Naruto's sensory field flared a warning. The villain's unstable biology, pushed past its limit by the quirk suppressants and the forceful takedown, was going critical. It wasn't an attack. It was a systemic collapse. The man's cells, overcharged for too long without regulation, were beginning to break down, releasing energy in a final, lethal burst. Mirror's shield, basking in the applause, didn't sense it. The support heroes were already powering down their equipment. Naruto was moving again before the thought fully formed. He blurred past the medical tent, a streak of orange and shadow that the cameras, focused on the victory stand, didn't catch. He landed between the hero and the villain, his back to the cameras. "Get back," he said, his voice cutting through the celebratory noise with the quiet force of a command forged in war councils. Mirror's shield blinked, his smile faltering. "Who are you? This is a secured hero operation." "He's dying. His body can't contain the energy backlash." Naruto knelt, placing a hand on the villain's chest. Through his palm, he felt the chaotic, boiling turmoil within. It was like a poorly formed raisin gun tearing itself apart from the inside. No control. No discipline. Just raw, genetic power eating its host alive. "What are you?" Mirror's shield reached for him. Naruto ignored him. He had seconds. Sealing jutsu was out. The man's body wasn't a scroll. Forcibly sealing the energy could kill him instantly. He needed to bleed it off, to guide the chaotic release. He formed a single-hand seal with his free hand, a focusing technique, and channeled his own immense chakra not into the man, but around him. He created a stabilizing field, a buffer, using his chakra to gently coax the erupting biological energy away from vital organs, to dissipate it as heat and light rather than a detonation. To the outside world, it looked strange. The unknown man in orange touched the defeated villain, and the villain's body began to glow with a soft, golden light. The dangerous, jagged crystal remnants dissolved into motes of harmless energy. The man's labored breathing evened out. The imminent explosion was averted, transformed into a gentle, healing luminescence. But the cost was visible. Sweat broke out on Naruto's brow. The process required exhausting control. It was the kind of technique that had no name, born from a lifetime of managing the volatile, immense power of a tailed beast within himself. It was an understanding of containment that this world's quirk suppression technology, a blunt instrument, could never achieve. The camera drones, finally noticing the interruption, zoomed in. The crowd's cheers died into confused murmurs. Mirror's shield recovered, his face hardening into a mask of professional outrage. "You're interfering with licensed hero work. You've compromised the arrest." He gestured, and two other heroes moved to flank Naruto. Naruto stood, the glow fading from his hands and the now stable villain. He looked at Mirror's shield, then at the cameras, his gaze weary and deeply unimpressed. "Your arrest almost killed him. And you missed a child in the evacuation zone." The statement, delivered without heat, was more devastating than any shout. It hung in the suddenly silent air. Before Mirror's shield could formulate a response, a new voice cut through, dry and authoritative. "The child has been confirmed. He's in triage." A man with long black hair, dressed in a dark uniform and a wraparound scarf, stood at the edge of the cordon. His eyes were bloodshot and tired, but they missed nothing. He held up a hero license. "Shoda Aizawa, Yui High School faculty. The operation commander has requested your presence." His gaze was fixed on Naruto. "Both of you." The debriefing was held in a mobile command vehicle. The air was thick with tension and the sterile smell of antiseptic. Mirror's shield, out of his armor now and revealed as a man in his 40s with a tight jaw named Kenji Hato, stood rigidly. Aizawa leaned against the console, his arms crossed. A woman in a sharp suit, representing the Hero Public Safety Commission, watched with cold eyes from a video screen. And Naruto stood in the center, having given no name, his story a calculated series of omissions. A traveler. Someone with a meta ability, focused on sensing biological stress and energy fields. He presented himself as a civilian with unusual, utility-based skills. "You unlawfully entered an active danger zone," the commission woman stated. "You disrupted a licensed hero's procedure. You applied an unlicensed, unquantified ability to a detained individual. Explain why we shouldn't have you detained for quirk misuse and obstruction." Naruto met her pixelated gaze. "A life was in immediate danger your procedures ignored. Another life was being ended by those same procedures. I acted to preserve both." The evacuation was thorough, Hato snapped. It wasn't, Aizawa said flatly, not looking at him. The basement apartments in that complex weren't on the architectural schematics from the city planning office. The evacuation team went by the schematics. It was a systemic oversight. And the villain? The commission woman pressed. Was a metabolic cascade failure induced by quirk overuse and your suppression cuffs, Naruto said. Your technology works by inhibiting the quirk factor. It doesn't account for the accumulated biological debt. He would have died within 3 minutes, releasing a wave of crystallizing energy in a 20-meter radius. Silence. You can sense that? Aizawa asked, his interest clinical. I can. And you can mitigate it? Sometimes. If I reach it in time. The commission woman leaned forward. That is a significant ability. Why are you not licensed? Why have we no record of you? Naruto was silent for a long moment. He thought of his own world, of the village hidden in the leaves, of the Hokage who bore the weight of a military dictatorship disguised as a government. He thought of child soldiers given headbands instead of licenses. The structures were different, but the fundamental transaction, institutional power exchanging safety for the liberty of the powerful, felt hauntingly familiar. I don't believe in your system, he said finally, the words simple and heavy. You train children to fight your battles. You turn pain into publicity. You create hierarchies of power that decide who is allowed to save people. I've seen where that path leads. It leads to ruins, and to orphans wondering why the symbols they believed in didn't protect them. The vehicle was utterly still. Hato looked furious. The commission woman's face was unreadable. Aizawa simply watched, his chin buried in his scarf. It was Aizawa who broke the stalemate. Your actions, while unorthodox and illegal, saved 2 lives and potentially prevented significant collateral damage. The commission could prosecute. It would be a complex case, given the public footage that is already circulating. He glanced at a tablet where social media feeds showed blurred images of a man in orange diverting energy. The narrative was confused, not yet solidified. Alternatively, Aizawa continued, his eyes locking with Naruto's. Given your unique sensory capabilities and your pragmatic approach to crisis management, you could be placed under observation and temporary probation at an institution that deals with managing powerful, unconventional abilities. Naruto understood the offer. A gilded cage. A way for the system to absorb him, study him, and neutralize him as a threat. What institution? He asked, though he already sensed the answer. Yue High School, Aizawa said. As a special observer attached to the faculty. You would be under my supervision. You would not teach. You would not hold authority. You would observe, and in crisis situations where your specific skills are deemed applicable, you may act under direct instruction. You want to put an unlicensed, system-critical civilian with unknown capabilities in a school full of child heroes? The commission woman's voice was icy. I want to understand what he sees that we don't, Aizawa replied, his voice leaving no room for debate. And I would rather have him where I can watch him. Naruto considered. He was adrift in this strange world. Its language was familiar, its piece of fragile illusion he recognized. Its children were being groomed for a war they didn't understand. He had tried retirement. He had tried peace. It had never fit. Perhaps this was his purpose, even here. Not to fight their wars, but to shield their children from the worst of it. To be a whisper of a different truth. He looked at Aizawa, the tired man who carried the weight of his own disillusionment like a shield. He saw a pragmatist, not a true believer. All right, Naruto said. I'll come. As he spoke, deep within the seal that was now only a memory of connection, a familiar, rumbling presence stirred, not the beast itself, for Kurama was gone, but the indelible imprint of his wisdom, a ghost in Naruto's psyche. Careful, kid, the ghost of the Nine Tails seemed to whisper. You're not walking into a village. You're walking into a factory that makes symbols. And they'll either break you on the assembly line, or they'll try to paint you as their newest model. Naruto didn't answer. He just followed Aizawa out of the command vehicle, into the flashing lights of the aftermath, where the story was already being rewritten into something palatable for the evening news. He didn't look back. The weight of 2 saved lives was a concrete thing in his chest. The weight of the system he was about to enter was a vast, shadowy mountain ahead. He had scaled mountains before. He had carried heavier weights. But he had never had to do it while trying to keep a generation of children from being crushed beneath them. Chapter 2: The Observation of Symbols. Yue High School was a monument. Not to learning, or to safety, but to an idea. Its towering H-shaped main building gleamed under a sun that felt too bright, too clean, for the world Naruto knew. It spoke of wealth, of permanence, of institutional confidence. As he walked beside Aizawa through the massive front gates, His sensory field brushed against the structure. He felt the vibration of hundreds of young, powerful life signs within. He felt the hum of advanced technology, security systems, training equipment. And beneath that, like a low-grade electrical current, he felt the simmering, anxious energy of children pushed to excel in the art of sanctioned violence. "Your presence is a compromise," Aizawa said without preamble, his eyes forward. "The Commission agreed to probationary observation because the alternative, you as a free agent with your particular insights, is a narrative risk. Here you are contained. You will be given a guest ID, access to public areas, and an observer's pass for my classes and certain training exercises. You will not interact with students without my express permission. You will not demonstrate your abilities. You are here to be assessed, not to participate. Is that clear?" Naruto nodded, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket. "You want to see if I'm a threat?" "I want to see what you are," Aizawa corrected, a slight edge to his voice. "Your actions at the incident displayed a level of tactical awareness and crisis prioritization that bypassed standard hero protocol entirely. You saw the unstable variable in the villain and the oversight in the evacuation where we saw a contained scenario and a cleared zone. That is either a tremendous asset or a dangerous precedent. I intend to find out which." They entered the main building. The halls were wide, vaulted, spotless. Students in uniforms moved in clusters, their conversations a buzz of excitement, anxiety, gossip about quirks and rankings and internships. Naruto's senses washed over them. He didn't see their costumes or their smiles. He felt the twinges of overexertion in their muscles from yesterday's training. He sensed the elevated heart rates of those struggling with social pressure. He detected the subtle, lingering ache in one boy's bones, a poorly healed fracture. This wasn't a school, it was a conservatory for living weapons, and the students bore the minor stresses and strains of their tuning. Aizawa led him to a stark, utilitarian office, his own. "Homeroom for Class 1A begins in 20 minutes. You will observe from the back. You will not speak. Your only task is to watch." "Watch what?" Naruto asked, his gaze drifting to the window overlooking the training grounds. "Watch what we're building," Aizawa said, his tone devoid of pride. "And then tell me what you think is going to break first." The classroom of Class 1A was a study in controlled potential. 20 students sat at their desks, their postures ranging from rigid discipline to casual slouches, but the air itself was charged. Naruto stood in the shadowed alcove at the rear of the room, leaning against the wall, effectively invisible. Aizawa had introduced him with a single, brusque sentence. "This is a provisional observer. Ignore him." The students had glanced his way with brief curiosity, which had quickly faded into the greater imperative of the school day. All but one. A boy with green, perpetually worried eyes and a face that seemed to carry the weight of the world had looked at Naruto with something more than curiosity. It was a spark of recognition of seeing. Midoriya. Aizawa had briefed him on the names. The one who broke his body to use his power. Naruto's sensory field touched the boy gently. The damage was extensive, a latticework of old, poorly mended tears and muscle and sinew, a history of self-destruction written in scar tissue. It was a body that spoke of a desperate, painful resolve. Naruto understood that language fluently. Aizawa began roll call, his voice a dull monotone that demanded silence. Naruto watched. He saw the explosive blonde boy Bakugo, whose chakra signature, for lack of a better term in this world, was a crackling, volatile sphere of pride and fury. The energy didn't just reside in his palms, it suffused him, a constant, pressurized state. He was a grenade with the pin halfway out. He saw the dual-toned boy, Todoroki, who was a study in containment. One half of his physiology burned with a fierce, banked heat. The other half was a still, cold void, a glacier of suppressed emotion. The divide was not just physical, it ran through his very spirit, a chasm of trauma walled off by sheer will. Naruto had seen this before, in victims of profound childhood conditioning. A weapon honed by a craftsman who saw only utility. He saw the others, a girl vibrating with nervous energy, a boy made of hardened skin, a creature of darkness wearing a student's uniform. Each a unique expression of power, each already being molded into a shape that fit the hero industry's catalog. Aizawa finished roll call and fixed them with his dead-eyed stare. Today's foundational heroics exercise will be a revised rescue scenario. The focus is on threat assessment and civilian prioritization in a dynamic, collapsing environment. You will be using Training Ground Gamma. A murmur of anticipation ran through the class. However, Aizawa continued, there will be a complicating factor. The observer will be present on the field. All eyes snapped back to Naruto. This time, the curiosity was laced with confusion and a hint of challenge, particularly from Bakugo. His role is passive. He is a sensor. He will be positioned in the zone. You are to conduct your exercise as if he is not there. But be aware, he will be evaluating the environmental stability in ways your sensors cannot. If he moves, it means you have missed a critical structural failure or a trap-simulated civilian. Consider it an automatic point deduction for the team in whose sector he intervenes. It was a clever test, Naruto realized. A way to evaluate his usefulness without giving him agency. A way to pit the student's performance against his perception. Now suit up. Buses leave in 10 minutes. Training Ground Gamma was a replica of an urban disaster zone, a maze of crumbling concrete buildings, fractured roads, and simulated fires, cold, chemical smoke. It was realistic, but to Naruto's senses, it felt like a stage set. The stresses in the structures were known, calculated, safe. The civilians were sophisticated animatronic dummies programmed to scream and call for help. The villains were training robots with padded, non-lethal weaponry. The students, clad in their hero costumes, looked like a parade of colorful potential. They were divided into teams of 4, each assigned a quadrant of the training zone. Their objective: neutralize any active threats and evacuate all civilians to a safe point within a time limit. Naruto was positioned on a central, stable platform that gave him a view of the entire zone. Aizawa stood beside him, a capture weapon loosely around his shoulders, watching through binoculars. Begin, Aizawa said into a calm. Chaos erupted, but it was a choreographed chaos. Team Alpha, led by a boy named Ida, moved with mechanical precision, clearing buildings in a strict pattern. Team Beta, with Bakugo at its head, opted for aggressive forward momentum, blowing a hole in a wall to create a shortcut, ignoring the potential for destabilization. Team Gamma, which included Midoriya and Todoroki, was methodical but slower, with Midoriya frantically muttering analysis and Todoroki creating ice pathways for evacuation. Naruto closed his eyes. He expanded his sensory field, not to monitor the students' quirks, but to listen to the training ground itself. He felt the vibrations through the foundations as Bakugo's explosions rattled support beams. He felt the thermal stress as Todoroki's ice rapidly contracted and expanded materials. He felt the subtle shifts in weight distribution as robots moved through compromised buildings. It was all, technically, within safe parameters. UA's engineers were the best. But safe didn't mean smart. It didn't mean kind. His attention was drawn to Team Delta sector. A girl with earphone jacks was using her quirk to listen for civilians, but the simulated smoke and noise from other sectors was confusing her. They had missed a dummy in a basement, its distress signal muffled. Standard procedure would be to mark the building as clear and move on. Naruto opened his eyes, looked at Aizawa, and pointed silently to the building in question. Aizawa spoke into his calm. Team Delta. You have an oversight in Grid G7. A simulated life sign. Recheck. The team startled, redirected. The girl flushed with embarrassment. They located the dummy. Point deduction. The exercise continued. Naruto pointed out 2 more oversights. A robot hiding in a thermal blind spot created by a fire, and a structural weakness in a bridge Team Beta was about to send civilians across. Each time, Aizawa's voice would cut in, cool and corrective. The students began to glance nervously at the central platform. The observer wasn't just watching, he was seeing through the simulation. Then, in Team Gamma's sector, something shifted. Midoriya, in his frantic effort to clear a building ahead of a collapsing timer, used a burst of his power, a localized smash, to destroy a robot menacing a group of dummies. The force was controlled, but it was more than the pre-stressed building was rated for. Naruto felt it immediately. A critical support column, already weakened by previous robot activity, groaned under the new vibration. The building wouldn't collapse fully, but a partial cave-in of the upper floor was imminent. And according to the exercise parameters, that upper floor had been cleared. But parameters were theoretical. Reality was sensory. On the upper floor, unnoticed by the team below, a single animatronic dummy, its movement circuit glitching, had staggered back into a room from the hallway. Naruto didn't wait for Aizawa. He moved. He dropped from the platform, landing silently on a lower strut, then pushed off, crossing the 60 meters to the building in 3 swift, chakra-enhanced leaps that were more efficient than spectacular. He didn't use the front door. He went straight up the wall, his feet adhering to the surface, and slipped through a 3rd-story window just as the ceiling above began to buckle. The dummy was in the center of the room, its arms jerking. Naruto grabbed it, yanked it toward the window as a cascade of lightweight, safety-rated debris showered down. He shielded the dummy with his body, turning his back to the fall. It was harmless training material, but the principle mattered. He dropped back out the window, dummy in tow, and landed lightly in the alley beside the building as the simulated collapse settled with a rumble and a cloud of dust. Team Gamma rounded the corner, Midoriya in the lead, his face pale with horror at the collapse. He skidded to a halt, seeing Naruto setting the dummy upright. You went back in?" Midoriya stammered. "But the building was clear," the sensor said. "The sensors missed a malfunction," Naruto said, his voice calm. He tapped the dummy's head, where a faulty relay was sparking. And your action downstairs made the structure unstable. You fixed your immediate problem but created a secondary one you didn't see. Midoriya looked stricken. Todoroki watched, his heterochromatic eyes unreadable. Aizawa's voice crackled over the public address. Exercise terminated. All teams return to the muster point. Team Gamma, report to the observation platform. Back on the platform, the air was frigid. The other teams had loaded onto the buses, casting glances back at the scene. Team Gamma stood before Aizawa, who looked more exhausted than angry. Naruto stood slightly apart. Midoriya, Aizawa began, his voice dangerously quiet. Your controlled use of power is improving. But control isn't just about limiting damage to your own body or your direct target. It's about understanding the entire ecosystem of a conflict. You saw robot and civilians. You solved that equation. You did not calculate the structural equation. In a real disaster zone, that oversight would have killed someone, possibly a fellow hero or a civilian you thought was safe. Midoriya's head was bowed, his fists clenched. I'm sorry, Sensei. I saw the timer and You prioritized the visible objective over the environmental stability. Aizawa finished. It's a common error in hero training. We focus on the villain, the rescue. We treat the battlefield as a static backdrop. It is not. He turned his gaze to Naruto. The observer intervened because he perceived the instability and the overlooked life sign. He acted outside the exercise parameters. Tell me, Midoriya, was he wrong to do so? Midoriya's head snapped up. He looked at Naruto, then at the dummy standing placidly to the side. And no. He wasn't wrong. He prevented a failure. He did, Aizawa said. But he is not a licensed hero. He has no authority to be on that field. By the strictest interpretation, he compromised the exercise, could have interfered with your learning, and put himself at risk. The commission would call it vigilantism. A liability. He paused, letting the contradiction hang. So, which is more important? The rules of the system, or the result on the ground? The question paralyzed Midoriya. His worldview, built on the sanctity of heroes and the system that created them, quivered. Bakugo, listening from where he lurked near the bus door, scowled deeply. Todoroki's expression remained closed, but his eyes were fixed on Naruto. I don't know, Midoriya whispered, the admission costing him. Think about it, Aizawa said. All of you. Dismissed. Get on the bus. The students filed away. Midoriya paused, looking back at Naruto. There were 1,000 questions in his eyes, but he asked none of them. When they were gone, Aizawa let out a long, weary sigh. Well? They're skilled, Naruto said, watching the bus pull away. They're brave. They want to save people. That's not the problem. Then what is? They're being taught to see the world in chapters. The threat chapter. The rescue chapter. The victory chapter. They aren't being taught to read the whole book at once, the cause, the context, the collateral damage that keeps happening after the last page. He turned to Aizawa. That building was a simulation. But the habit of mind they're building is real. They're learning to accept a certain amount of acceptable oversight, acceptable collateral damage, because the system tells them the priority is the headline victory. Who decides what's acceptable, Aizawa? The one on the platform with the clipboard, or the one in the rubble? Aizawa didn't answer for a long time. The wind tugged at his capture scarf. You're not here to observe my class, are you? He said finally. No, Naruto agreed. I'm here to observe the factory. And to count the cracks in the foundations you're asking them to stand on. He walked toward the bus, leaving Aizawa alone on the platform with the silent, staring animatronic dummy, a symbol of a life that only mattered when the system's sensors happened to be working. Chapter 3: The Cost of a Symbol. The staff room at Yui was a study in contrast. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating sleek, modern furniture and the scent of high-quality coffee. Yet the atmosphere was dense with a tension no amount of light could dispel. Naruto stood near the back, a silent specter in his muted clothes, as the faculty meeting unfolded around the central table. He was not invited to sit. He was a specimen under glass. Unacceptable precedent, declared a tall, willowy woman with her hair styled into 2 long horns. Midnight, the R-rated hero. He's not a teacher. He's not a pro. He disrupted a certified training exercise. Students need to learn from their mistakes in a controlled environment, not have some unvetted censor swoop in to correct them. The mistake would have been a simulated casualty due to a sensor glitch and a student's lack of environmental awareness. Aizawa countered, slouched in his chair, eyes half-lidded. The observer identified a flaw in our simulation and a gap in our students' training methodology. That is data. Suppressing data is poor pedagogy. Pedagogy? boomed a voice like grinding cement. The massive form of ectoplasm, his face obscured by his prosthetic mask, leaned forward. This isn't about teaching theory, Aizawa. It's about safety and protocol. His actions, while arguably beneficial in that micro-instance, undermine the authority of the exercise structure. Students must trust the system. They should trust their own senses and judgment more, Aizawa muttered, but the words were lost in the rising debate. Vlad King, the stern homeroom teacher of Class 1B, crossed his arms. My concern is his influence. Bakugo reported that Midoriya was moping all evening, questioning fundamental tactics. Todoroki has been withdrawn. This observer's presence is causing ideological turbulence in students who need to be focusing on foundational skills. Perhaps they should be turbulent, came a new, frail voice. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the skeletal figure in the baggy suit who had been sitting quietly in the corner, a steaming cup of tea held in bony hands. Yagi Tashinori. All Might. The symbol of peace. He was a ghost of his televised image. Naruto's sensory field didn't register the vibrant, overwhelming power the world associated with the man. Instead, he perceived a ruin, a body held together by scar tissue, willpower, and medical science. A cavern where a lung should be. A digestive system that was a patchwork of repairs. The man was a testament to survival, but also to the absolute, brutal cost of bearing the weight of a society's expectations on one's flesh. Young Midoriya came to me. All Might continued, his voice soft but carrying. He asked a question. If a rule of the system prevents you from saving one person, is the system wrong? He looked around the room, his sunken blue eyes serious. That is not the question of a student moping. That is the question of a hero thinking. Truly thinking. Perhaps we have been too focused on teaching them how to be heroes, and not enough on teaching them why, and at what cost. The commission liaison, a severe man in a gray suit who had been observing via a tablet propped on the table, cleared his throat. The why is established by society and enforced by the commission. The cost is managed through support gear, insurance, and retirement pensions. This philosophical digression is a luxury. The practical matter is the observer's status. His probationary period is for observation and assessment, not for field intervention. Another breach of protocol will result in termination of this arrangement and judicial review. Naruto, who had been listening to the subtext, the fear of change, the institutional rigidity, the genuine but fragmented concern for the children, finally spoke. His voice was low, but it cut through the room's politics. What is the primary objective? Everyone looked at him. The liaison frowned. Explain. Of Yue, Naruto said, meeting each faculty member's gaze in turn. Is it to produce licensed heroes who follow protocol? Or is it to protect people and cultivate those best able to do so? Because in my observation, those two objectives are beginning to diverge. They are the same objective, Vlad King stated firmly. Are they? Naruto asked. He took a single step forward, not threatening, but making himself the focal point. Protocol dictated the evacuation zone was clear. It wasn't. Protocol prioritized the capture of a destabilizing villain. It nearly killed him. Protocol in the training exercise said the building was clear. It wasn't. Every time, the protocol was a model. The reality was Messier. You're training them to trust the model. I'm suggesting they need to learn to see the reality despite the model. All Might was watching him intently. The shadow in his eyes was not disapproval, but a deep, personal recognition. And who are you to lecture us on reality? Midnight asked, though her tone was more curious now than hostile. Someone from a place where the models failed, Naruto said simply. Where we built systems to protect children, and then sent them to die for those systems. Where we called them heroes to make the necessity taste better. I see the same ingredients here. Powerful children. A world that tells them their power is a mandate. A system eager to channel that mandate into a serviceable, predictable form. He looked directly at All Might. And a symbol at the top, whose very existence makes the system feel safe, even as it cracks under his feet. The room held its breath. No one spoke to All Might that way. But All Might did not get angry. A sad, weary smile touched his lips. You see a great deal, Mr. Uzumaki. It's hard not to, Naruto replied. When the cost is written so clearly on the world around you. And on you. An alarm blared, sudden and strident. The digital screen on the wall lit up with a crisis alert. Not a training exercise. A real incident. Multiple villain incursions reported in the Kashi Ward shopping district. The automated voice announced. High-density civilian population. Local heroes requesting immediate assistance. Threat level A. The faculty snapped into action, professional personas overriding debate. Aizawa was on his feet, his capture scarf coiling. Class 1A is in Foundational Hero Studies with Cementas. They are not cleared for live combat. The commission liaison spoke into his own calm. UA faculty are authorized to respond. Prioritize containment and civilian evacuation. Observer Uzumaki, you are to remain on campus. That is a direct order. Naruto's senses were already stretching out, miles beyond the campus walls, towards the ward. He felt it, not the quirks, but the collective panic, a rising tide of fear clouds. And beneath that, something else. A cold, spreading numbness. A void where emotion should be. It was familiar in the worst way, the emotional signature of deliberate, systemic violence. This wasn't a random crime. This was an operation. They're not there for robbery or chaos, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the commotion. The room paused. The emotional field is wrong. The fear is concentrated, but the intent, it's focused. Surgical. This is a distraction or a trap. Analysis is not your purview, the liaison snapped. You have no field data. I have the data of their collective terror, Naruto shot back. And the empty space where the villain's emotions should be. They're suppressed. Controlled. That takes discipline or technology your usual street thugs don't have. All Might was already at the door, his body trembling slightly. We cannot ignore a request for aid. But caution is advised. Aizawa Vlad with me. The rest secure the school. As the heroes moved to leave, Naruto looked at Aizawa. A silent communication passed between them, the pragmatist and the outsider. Aizawa gave a minute, almost imperceptible nod. The order stands, Uzumaki, the liaison said, stepping into his path. You are confined to campus. Naruto met the man's eyes. How many civilian lives is upholding my probation worth to you? Give me a number, so I know the exchange rate. He didn't wait for an answer. He walked past the sputtering liaison, not towards the main exit, but towards a side window. As he passed All Might, the symbol of peace reached out a bony hand, not to stop him, but to briefly clasp his shoulder. The grip was weak, but the meaning was strong. I see you. Be careful. Then Naruto was at the window. He didn't smash through it. He unlocked it, slid it open, and stepped out onto the narrow ledge. Below, the campus grounds stretched out. In the distance, the sky over Kashi Ward was beginning to stain with unnatural colors. He dropped. Kashi Ward was bedlam. The shopping district, usually a vibrant stream of consumerism, was a river of panic. Civilians stampeded, tripping over discarded bags and each other. Heroes in flashy costumes were engaged in scattered skirmishes. The villains were a disparate lot, men and women with mutation quirks, energy emitters, strength enhancers, but Naruto's initial read was confirmed. Their movements were coordinated. They fought not to win, but to herd, to corral the chaos into specific channels. And their emotional signatures were flat, dulled. Quirk suppressant tech did that sometimes, but this was different. This was chemical. Or ideological. Naruto landed on a rooftop overlooking the main plaza. He immediately sank into a crouch, minimizing his profile. This was not his fight to lead. His role was the one he'd always been best at, the unseen pivot, the fixer of overlooked failures. He closed his eyes, expanding his sensory field to its maximum range. He filtered out the screaming surface emotions, the flashy energy bursts of quirks. He sought the quieter disasters. There. A department store. Its main entrance was a war zone, heroes and villains trading blows. But his senses flowed through the air vents, into the back corridors. A group of 20-30 civilians, mostly employees and elderly shoppers, were trapped in a storage room. The door was barricaded, but the ceiling above them was groaning, damaged by a concussion wave from outside. They were quiet, terrified, trying not to be noticed. There. An above-ground parking garage. A villain with a vibration quirk was using it as a fortress, sending shattering pulses to keep heroes at bay. But the structure's integrity was failing. On the third level, a family was huddled in their car, the vehicle wedged between collapsed concrete slabs. And there. The cold, focused void. It emanated from the central fountain plaza, now empty of civilians. A single figure stood there, watching the chaos unfold. A young man with pale blue hair, covered in disembodied hands. Shigaraki Tamura. The eye of the storm. His emotional field wasn't just suppressed, it was a howling abyss of neglect and nihilistic focus. This was the source. This was the purpose. Naruto prioritized. The trapped civilians first. The structural failures second. The source last. He moved across the rooftops, a blur of orange and shadow. He reached the department store's roof access, picked the lock with a whisper of chakra-formed pins, and slipped inside. The stairwell reeked of smoke and ozone. He could hear the battle raging through the floor below. He found the storage room from the inside, approached the barricaded door. Stay calm, he said, his voice firm but reassuring through the metal. I'm getting you out. The fighting is on the other side of the building. I need you to move away from the door and cover your heads for a moment. A whimper of assent. He placed his palm on the doorframe, not on the barricade itself. Channeling chakra, he vibrated the molecular structure of the wall adjacent to the door, just enough to weaken the bonding. Then, with a sharp, precise kick, he broke through a section of drywall and insulation, creating a new, man-sized opening into a parallel janitorial closet. This way. Quickly and quietly. He helped them through, one by one, a trembling cashier, a janitor supporting an elderly woman, a mother clutching 2 children. He led them not towards the main battle, but through a labyrinth of service corridors to a loading dock on the opposite side of the block, where the sounds of combat were distant. Go straight down that alley. Keep left. You'll reach a police cordon in 2 blocks. He didn't wait for their thanks. He was already gone, back into the building, heading for the roof. Next, the parking garage. The vibration villain was still in place, now dueling with Kashi Woods, whose bindings were being shattered by the pulses. Naruto scaled the outside of the garage, staying away from the villain's line of sight. He felt the tremors through the concrete, mapped the frequency. It was creating a standing wave of stress on the third-level supports. He reached the trapped car. The family inside, a father, mother, young daughter, were sobbing, sure they were doomed. Naruto put a finger to his lips, then placed both hands on the largest concrete slab pinning the car. He matched his chakra frequency to the villain's vibrations, but in reverse. He didn't push against the slab. He introduced a counterwave that cancelled out the resonant frequency stressing the material. The grinding noise ceased. The slab settled stable. With the immediate collapse risk neutralized, he used pure strength, augmented not by Kurama's rage but by years of disciplined chakra enhancement, to lift the slab just enough for the car to reverse out. The father, shaking, met his eyes through the windshield. Naruto nodded towards a downward ramp that was still clear. The car sped away. Below, Kashi Woods finally managed to ensnare the vibration villain from an unexpected angle. One problem contained. Naruto returned to his rooftop vantage. The hero response was stabilizing. The chaos was being boxed in. But the void in the plaza remained. Shigaraki hadn't moved. He was waiting. Then, Naruto sensed it. A new, massive energy signature approaching from above. A familiar, vibrant, overwhelming presence that was also a lie. All Might descended from the sky like a golden meteor, landing between Shigaraki and the fleeing crowds with a shockwave that cracked the plaza tiles. He stood in his muscled form, a smile plastered on his face, but Naruto could feel the immense, painful strain it took to maintain it. The man was tearing himself apart to uphold the symbol. "Fear not, citizens!" the voice boomed. "For I am here!" The effect was instantaneous. A surge of hope, bright and desperate, washed over the civilian emotional field. The heroes fought with renewed vigor. The script was being followed. Shigaraki looked up at the symbol of peace, his head tilted. He didn't seem afraid. He seemed interested. "The final boss," he rasped, his voice scratchy and dry. "But you're on a time limit, aren't you?" All Might's smile didn't falter. "Surrender. Your distraction has failed." "Has it?" Shigaraki said. He raised a hand, not towards All Might, but towards a seemingly empty section of the plaza. "Noma." The air ripped. A creature appeared. It was a monstrous thing, hulking, brain exposed, with beady eyes and a beak. Its emotional signature was not a void. It was nothing. A blank slate. A manufactured thing. And its physical power, as it lunged at All Might with speed that belied its size, was staggering. The battle that ensued was a spectacle of primal force. All Might versus the Noma. Punches exchanged that created thunderclaps, shockwaves that shattered the remaining windows in the district. It was exactly what the League of Villains wanted, the symbol of peace, fighting for his life against a monster, on live television. But Naruto's attention was split. He saw All Might, holding his own but fading, the strain becoming a scream in his body. He saw Shigaraki, watching with the rapt attention of a gamer. And he saw, on the periphery, a figure in a black school uniform with gold buttons slipping through the chaos, heading towards the plaza. Midoriya. No. The boy's face was a mask of terrified determination. He was moving to help his mentor, to intervene in a battle between titans. Naruto moved faster. He intercepted Midoriya at the edge of the plaza, grabbing his arm and yanking him behind a shattered news kiosk. "Let me go! All Might, he needs you to live!" Naruto hissed, his grip iron. "Look at him! Not with your eyes. With your senses. What do you see?" Midoriya, frantic, tried to pull away. Then he stopped. He really looked. He saw the strain in All Might's smile, the slight tremor in his normally rock-steady stance, the way he favored his left side. The reality behind the symbol. "He's hurt. He's been hurt for a long time," Naruto said, his voice low and urgent. "And that thing he's fighting is designed to hurt him more. You rushing in won't save him. It'll give them a vulnerability to exploit. You'll be a hostage his heart can't ignore. Is that the help you want to be? The truth of it crashed into Midoriya. He sagged, his green eyes wide with horror and understanding. On the plaza, All Might landed a colossal blow, sending the Nomu hurtling through the roof of a building. He stood panting, steam rising from his body, the telltale sign of his power's limit approaching. Shigaraki snarled, scratching at his neck. Not enough. Not enough to kill the symbol. He took a step forward, his hand outstretched towards All Might's back. Decay was his quirk. One touch would be the end. A strand of capture scarf wrapped around Shigaraki's wrist, yanking it away. Aizawa dropped from a rooftop, his hair floating, his eyes red and active, erasing Shigaraki's quirk. The teacher. Shigaraki rasped, annoyed. Annoying. The situation had stalled, but it was brittle. All Might was at his limit. Aizawa was holding one villain quirkless. The Nomu was recovering. And the cold, void-like purpose in Shigaraki was curdling into something darker, more violent. Naruto made a decision. He couldn't win this fight. But he could break the script. He let go of Midoriya. Stay. Here. He stepped out from behind the kiosk and walked calmly into the center of the plaza, placing himself between the recovering All Might and the frustrated Shigaraki. All eyes turned to him. The unknown man in orange. Another NPC? Shigaraki muttered, his scratched neck bleeding. You wanted a symbol to break, Naruto said, his voice carrying without shouting. But you're looking at the wrong one. He's just a man who carried too much. The real symbol isn't him. It's the idea he represents. And you can't break an idea by killing its carrier. You only make it stronger. Shut up, Shigaraki hissed. You don't understand anything. This whole rotten society, these fake heroes, it all needs to be destroyed. I understand neglect, Naruto said, stopping a dozen paces away. He didn't assume a fighting stance. He just stood open, his senses fully extended, reading the emotional desolation before him. I understand being forged into a weapon by someone who should have protected you. I've stood where you're standing, hating the world that made you. But this, he gestured to the panic, the destruction, the Nomus struggling to its feet. This isn't destruction. It's just more of the same pain, passed around. You're not breaking the system. You're proving why it thinks it needs to exist. For a second, something flickered in Shigaraki's void-like eyes. Not understanding, but a spark of confusion. The script didn't have a character who spoke like this. Then, from the shadows, a dark, swirling portal opened. A man in a bartender's outfit, his head a swirling vortex of darkness, spoke. Shigaraki Tamura. The objective is compromised. The heroes are rallying. Withdraw. Shigaraki glared at Naruto, then at All Might, then at Aizawa. His hand twitched. This isn't over. We'll break your symbols. All of them. The portal expanded, engulfing Shigaraki, the Nomu, and the warping villain. They were gone. Silence fell, broken only by the distant sirens and the hiss of steam from All Might's body. The symbol of peace shuddered, and his muscular form deflated, leaving the skeletal Yagi Tashinori kneeling on the cracked ground, blood dripping from his mouth. The battle was over. The villains had withdrawn. The day was saved. Naruto turned away from the plaza, from the arriving media, from the stunned heroes. He walked back to where Midoriya stood, frozen. The boy looked from his fallen mentor to the man who had just faced down the leader of the League of Villains with words instead of fists. You, Midoriya whispered. You talked to him. Someone should have, a long time ago, Naruto said, his voice thick with a weariness that had nothing to do with physical exertion. He looked at the blood on the ground, at the broken city, at the child soldier before him with tears in his eyes. It rarely fixes anything. But it's the only place to start. He walked away, leaving the symbols, broken and intact, to be gathered up by the system that created them. Chapter 4. The Calculus of Damage. The aftermath of Kashi Ward was not a single event, but a series of interlocking consequences that spread like fissures in glass. Naruto felt them before he saw them, a tightening of the air at UA, a shift in the emotional frequencies of the students, a new and wary attention from the faculty that went beyond professional curiosity. He was no longer just an observer, he was a catalyst, and the reaction was unstable. His probation was not revoked. The commission's calculus, as explained to him in a frigid, windowless meeting room 2 days later, was coldly pragmatic. Your unauthorized intervention resulted in 0 additional casualties and may have prevented an escalation during the villain's confrontation with All Might. The same gray-suited liaison stated, his fingers steepled. The media narrative is manageable. An unknown civilian with a sensory quirk aiding in evacuation. Your direct engagement with the principal antagonist was brief and non-violent, thus not a clear violation of vigilantism statutes. Revoking your probation would require public explanation, which would elevate your profile. This is undesirable. Naruto sat across from him, silent. He understood. He was being tolerated not because they approved, but because erasing him had become more trouble than containing him. However, the liaison continued, his eyes like chips of flint. Your continued presence at UA is contingent on absolute adherence to new parameters. You will submit to weekly quirk analysis sessions. You will wear a biometric monitor at all times. He slid a thin, metallic band across the table. It was sleek, innocuous. It tracks location, vital signs, and through a proprietary dampening field, any large-scale emission of your metability. You will not leave campus without express authorization. You will not interact with any student outside of a supervised, faculty-present setting. Do you understand? Naruto picked up the band. It was cool, slightly heavier than it looked. A leash. He slipped it onto his wrist. It clicked shut with a final sound. I understand your terms. They are not terms. They are conditions of your continued liberty. The liaison stood. The world you have entered has rules, Uzumaki. Your alternative perspective does not absolve you of them. As Naruto walked the long corridor back to the main campus, the band felt like a brand. It didn't inhibit his chakra. His energy was too fundamentally different, internal, for their dampening field to even register it properly. But it was a symbol, just as potent as All Might's smile. A reminder that his personhood was now a conditional grant from the state. He found himself not at the main building, but drawn to the less frequented training grounds, Ground Beta, the replica cityscape. It was there he sensed a familiar, ragged energy signature, punctuated by the sound of shattering concrete and frustrated grunts. Midoriya was alone, drenched in sweat, slamming his fist into a reinforced training pillar again and again. Each blow was controlled, a precise percentage of his devastating power, but the emotional output was chaotic, desperate. The air around him crackled with green energy, but also with a cloud of guilt, confusion, and self-loathing so thick Naruto could taste it. Naruto watched from the shadow of a mock office building. He shouldn't approach. The band on his wrist was a silent alarm. But the boy was breaking himself on the pillar, not from training, but from punishment. He stepped out of the shadows. You'll fracture the bones in your hand again before you find an answer in that concrete. Midoriya whirled, his arm crackling with residual power. Seeing Naruto, he flinched, the energy sputtering out. Uzumaki-san. I'm just training. No, Naruto said, walking closer. He kept his distance, respecting the invisible boundary, but his voice carried. You're trying to beat a feeling out of yourself. It doesn't work. I've tried. Midoriya's bravado collapsed. His shoulders slumped, and he stared at his scarred, trembling fist. I froze. He whispered, the words ripped from him. All Might, he was fighting for his life. That monster, and I just stood there. You had to stop me. You had to tell me not to help. He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. What kind of hero does that make me? Naruto leaned against a nearby wall, crossing his arms. The biometric band gleamed dully in the afternoon light. The kind who lived. The kind who didn't give the enemy a weapon to use against the person he wanted to save. But he's All Might. He's the strongest. The protest was childlike, a plea for the old story to still be true. He's a man with one lung and a stomach held together by stitches, Naruto said, the truth delivered quietly, without malice. His strength was never infinite. It was borrowed, and the debt is coming due. You saw it. You felt it. Denying what you saw doesn't honor him. It disrespects the price he paid. Midoriya shook his head, trapped between devotion and the terrifying new reality. What was I supposed to do then? Just watch? Yes, Naruto said. Sometimes, watching is the hardest thing. Understanding the limits of the people you admire, the limits of your own power in a given moment, that's the first step to real strength. Not the strength to smash a villain, but the strength to choose the right fight, at the right time, in the right way. He gestured to the demolished training pillar. You're training to hit harder. But the fight at Kashi wasn't won by the hardest hit. It was ended by a choice to withdraw. Why do you think that was? Midoriya frowned, his analytical mind latching onto the puzzle despite his distress. The Noma was damaged. The heroes were surrounding them. Their objective wasn't to win a battle. It was to make a statement. To attack the symbol of peace. And did they? Naruto asked. No. All Might stood his ground. Did he? Naruto pressed. He's not in class today, is he? He's in the infirmary. Again. The villain walked away. The statement was made, the symbol can be bloodied. The image is cracked. They didn't need to kill him to achieve a victory. They just needed to prove he was mortal. And you, rushing in, would have proven something else, that his mortality is a vulnerability that endangers his successors. That would have been a far more valuable statement for them. The logic was cold, tactical, and it settled over Midoriya like a weight. His heroics were not just about saving people in the moment. They were moves on a larger board, with consequences he was only beginning to perceive. I never thought about it like that, he admitted, his voice small. The system you're training to join doesn't encourage you to, Naruto said. It encourages decisive action, visible victory. But war, and this is a kind of war, even if you dress it in costumes, is often about what you choose not to do. About enduring the unbearable sight of someone you love in danger, because acting would make it worse. His gaze grew distant, seeing not the training ground but other faces, other battles. The hardest lesson I ever learned was that sometimes, saving someone means standing back and letting them fight their own fight, even if it breaks your heart. He pushed off from the wall. Don't train to punish yourself for being human, Midoriya. Train to understand the entire board. Then decide what piece you need to be and when. He turned to leave. Uzumaki-san? Midoriya called out. Why are you telling me this? Aizawa-sensei said you're not supposed to. Naruto glanced at the band on his wrist, then back at the boy. Because someone once stood in the shadows and gave me pieces of the truth when I was too angry and too lost to see the whole picture. It's a debt. And debts have weight. He offered a faint, worn smile. Besides, your self-destructive training is putting a dent in school property. I'm just protecting UA's investment. He walked away, leaving Midoriya standing amidst the dust and debris, not with answers, but with a new and heavier set of questions. The consequences rippled outward. In Class 1A, the dynamic had shifted. Bakugo's fury was no longer just directed at Midoriya, but simmered inwardly, a kettle about to scream. He had watched the news feeds, seen the skeletal form of All Might after the fight. He had heard the whispers. The symbol was breakable. The pinnacle was flawed. For a boy whose entire identity was built on the absolute pursuit of the top, this was an existential tremor. He trained with a vicious, silent intensity, but his explosion seemed somehow quieter, more focused, and more desperate. Todoroki had sought Naruto out. Not with words, but with presence. He began appearing in the same quiet spaces, the empty library stacks late in the evening, the far end of the training field during cooldowns. He never spoke. He would just stand, or sit, within sight, as if trying to decipher a text written in a language only Naruto knew. Naruto allowed it. He sensed the glacier within the boy beginning to groan, pressured not by external force, but by the silent example of someone who carried their own scars without letting them define their entire being. The most immediate fallout, however, was institutional. All Might's collapse was not public knowledge, but within UA, it was an open secret. He taught his classes from a stool, his voice weaker, his explanations punctuated by coughs he tried to hide in a handkerchief. The students treated him with a hushed, fragile reverence that was worse, in its way, than fear. They were witnessing the idol's clay feet, and it terrified them. It was after one such class, as the students filed out with muted voices, that Yagi Toshinori found Naruto waiting in the hall. A word, young Uzumaki? He asked, the young sounding habitual rather than descriptive. They walked, not to an office, but to a secluded courtyard garden, a place of manicured tranquility. All Might, Yagi, lowered himself onto a stone bench with a soft groan. You spoke with young Midoriya, he said, not as an accusation, but a statement. He was breaking his hands on a training post. Naruto replied, standing a few feet away, watching a koi fish circle in a pond. He was trying to punch out his guilt for not saving you. Yagi sighed, a wet, ragged sound. He carries too much. I have placed too much on him. You gave him power and a purpose, Naruto said. In my experience, that's the gift that breaks most people. The ones who don't break are the ones who find their own purpose underneath the one they're given. Yagi looked at him, his sunken eyes piercing. You speak as if from experience. I was given a demon and told I was a hero. I was given a village and told I was its weapon. It took a long time, and many broken bones, to understand I was just a person who had to choose what to do with the weight. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the trickle of water. They targeted me, Yagi said finally. The League. They knew. About my time limit. About my weakness. This was not random. It was an assassination attempt on an idea. Yes. And you stood in front of him. Shigaraki. You spoke to him. He's a child, Naruto said, his voice flat. A terribly broken, dangerous child, but a child shaped by neglect. He doesn't need a hero to smash him. He needed an adult, once, a long time ago, to see his pain. No one did. Now the pain has grown teeth and ideology. Yagi bowed his head. You see the root of the disease where we see only the symptoms. It is a gift. And a curse. It's just sight, Naruto said. You built a society that looks at the flash of quirks, the spectacle of battles, the ranking of popularity. You stopped looking at the people underneath. At the cost. At the reasons why people break. You built a brilliant, glittering dam, and you never looked at the cracks forming in the foundation, or at the pressure building up behind it. What would you have had us do? Yagi asked, and for the first time, there was a hint of defensiveness, of pain, in his voice. Chaos ruled before. Fear was everywhere. We brought order. We brought hope. You brought a symbol, Naruto corrected gently. And symbols are static. Life isn't. You created a system that depends on the symbol holding, and now that it's cracking, the system has no backup plan except to find a new symbol to plug the hole. He looked at Yagi. That's what you're doing with Midoriya, isn't it? Preparing the next symbol. Yagi flinched as if struck. It's not like that. He is worthy. He has the heart. I don't doubt his heart, Naruto interrupted. I doubt the machine he's being fed into. You're replicating the cycle. One broken symbol replaces another, each one bearing the same impossible weight until they, too, break. When does it end? The question hung in the garden air, unanswerable. What is your alternative? Yagi whispered. I don't have one, Naruto admitted. I'm not from here. My world solutions were just as flawed. We hid our children in the shadows and called them soldiers. You parade yours in the light and call them heroes. The labels are different. The exploitation feels familiar. He finally turned to face the skeletal hero. But I know this. A system that requires the periodic sacrifice of its best and kindest on the altar of public safety is not a healthy system. It's a slow-motion suicide pact. Yagi had no response. The truth of it was a physical weight on his gaunt frame. You asked me why I spoke to Shigaraki, Naruto said, changing tack. It's because he, and the League, they are the embodied consequence of every person your shining system failed to see, failed to help, failed to love. They are the pressure from behind the dam. You can fight them forever, but unless you address the pressure, you're just bailing water from a sinking ship. And you're training children to be the bucket brigade. He pushed off from the wall where he'd been leaning. I'm confined to campus now. Monitored. They're afraid of what I see. You should be more afraid of what you've been choosing not to. Naruto left him there, in the quiet garden, with the koi and the weight of a crumbling legacy. The repercussions were not finished. That evening, as Naruto sat in the small, Spartan guest quarters he'd been assigned, the biometric band on his wrist emitted a soft, two-tone chime. A notification. He tapped it, and a holographic screen flickered to life above it. It was a summons. Not from the commission. Not from Aizawa. From Principal Nizu. The message was simple. Please join me for tea in my office at your earliest convenience. There are no observers. N. Naruto looked at the band. It was monitoring him, but the message had come through its own system. The principal was, in effect, using the leash to send a private invitation. It was a message in itself. I understand the constraints you are under. I work within and around them every day. He went. Nizu's office was as grand as one would expect, but warmer, filled with books and the smell of fine tea. The principal, a small, white-furred chimera of a being, hopped down from his large chair and poured 2 cups from an intricate porcelain set. Thank you for coming, Uzumaki-san, Nizu said, his voice cheerful but his black eyes holding a depth of intelligence that was immediately unsettling. I find formal meetings so stifling, don't you? Tea is better for conversation. Naruto took the offered cup, sitting in the chair opposite. You're not like the others. I am literally not like the others, Nizu chirked, sipping his tea. A creature made powerful by the irresponsibility of science, now in charge of guiding the next generation of the powerful. The irony is not lost on me. He set his cup down. I have reviewed all footage and reports from the Kashi Ward incident. Your actions, while unsanctioned, reduced net suffering. Your analysis of Shigaraki Tamura was psychosocially acute. And your conversation with young Midoriya, while a breach of your conditions, was pedagogically sound. You were monitoring me. I monitor everything that happens at my school, Nizu said, his smile benign. It is my purpose. I am curious. You see the flaws in our system with startling clarity. You articulate them in a way that disturbs my staff and terrifies the commission. What is it you want, Uzumaki-san? Truly? Naruto considered the question. I want the children in your care to survive their childhood with their souls intact. I want the weight of the world to be carried by the institutions built for it, not on the backs of teenagers who just want to help. I want the people who break to be seen as failures of the system, not as monsters to be put down. Nizu's whiskers twitched. Lofty goals. Impossible, some would say. Probably. And yet you act as if they are attainable. Why? Because someone has to act as if a better world is possible, Naruto said, his voice firm. Or we all just surrender to the cycles of violence and sacrifice. Niza was silent for a long moment, studying him. You are a foreign element. A catalyst. In chemistry, a catalyst is not consumed in the reaction it causes. But it can be poisoned. Rendered inert. He gestured to the band on Naruto's wrist. They will try to poison you. With rules. With isolation. With the sheer, grinding inertia of the way things are. I know. I cannot remove the band, Niza said. But I can adjust the algorithm of its reporting. Within limits. I can grant you slightly longer leashes within the campus. I can ensure your quirk analysis sessions are conducted by Recovery Girl, who is more interested in healing than in weaponizing. I can do this because, like you, I wish to see my students survive with their souls intact. And I believe your presence, managed carefully, may be a necessary irritant, a grain of sand that produces a pearl, rather than an infection. It was an offer of alliance from within the machinery. Not freedom, but a measure of agency. What do you want in return? Naruto asked. Continue to see what we miss, Niza said, his cheerfulness fading into something steely and serious. Continue to speak the truths that make us uncomfortable. But do it here. In my school. Where I can mitigate the fallout. Help me prepare them, not just for the battles they can see, but for the war they are already in, the war for what heroism even means. He raised his tiny teacup in a toast. To impossible goals, and the fools who pursue them. Naruto looked at the band, then at the small, brilliant creature before him. He saw not a warden, but a fellow pragmatist playing a very long, very dangerous game. He lifted his own cup. They drank in silence, a pact formed in the quiet eye of the gathering storm. The consequences of Kashi were still unfolding, but now, Naruto was no longer just a leaf in the wind. He had been given a precarious, monitored, but deliberate place to stand. Chapter 5: The Quiet War. The days at Yui settled into a new, tense rhythm. Naruto's world contracted to the bounds of the campus, his existence a monitored orbit around the epicenter of Hero Society's next generation. The biometric band was a constant presence, a cool reminder on his wrist that his autonomy was a leased commodity. Yet, as Niza had implied, its constraints had subtle, deliberate seams. His movement logs, he suspected, were edited with a light, algorithmic hand. His mandatory, quirk analysis sessions with Recovery Girl were less interrogations and more gentle, clinical conversations. Fascinating, the elderly heroine would mutter, scanning him with devices that beeped in confusion at his energy signatures. No quirk factor. No biological emitter. Your cellular energy is endogenous. Self-generated. Like a battery that recharges itself through metabolic processes we can't quantify. And the control, the fine motor application is extraordinary. You could perform microsurgery with this level of precision. It's just training, Naruto would say, which was both true and a monumental understatement. Recovery Girl would fix him with a sharp look over her glasses. Training implies a starting point of lesser ability. Your baseline control is already beyond anything our top pros achieve after decades. This didn't come from a gym. It came from a forge. She would tap her stylus against her tablet. Your file is a fiction, young man. But your body tells a truth. A very painful one. The scar tissue, the old microfractures in your bones, you've pushed yourself to the brink of dissolution and back, repeatedly. You understand the cost of power in a way these children can't yet fathom. Don't let them learn it the same way you did. It was an unexpected form of alliance. The school nurse, guardian of the physical cost, saw in him a walking cautionary tale and a potential salve. His interactions with students remained limited and supervised, but they evolved. He was no longer a ghost at the back of the class. Aizawa, in a move of pure, pragmatic theater, began incorporating him into tactical briefings for simulated exercises. Uzumaki will provide continuous environmental and biosensory feedback during the drill, Aizawa would announce to Class 1A, his voice flat. He will call out structural instabilities, overlooked hostiles, and physiological strain in your teammates. You will learn to integrate non-standard data into your decision matrix. Failure to adapt is failure, period. It turned training into a form of mental siege. The students, used to clear objectives and visible enemies, now had to contend with an omnipresent voice from the observation booth pointing out the cracks in their reality. Kirishima, your hardening is causing tendon fatigue in your left shoulder. You have 60 seconds of optimal combat before it fails. Ashido, your acid's pH is destabilizing the floor beneath you. Shift 3 meters west. Team B, you have clustered. Acoustic sensor profiles indicate a simulated sniper on the north tower has a clear firing solution. Disperse. Bakugo hated it most of all. The feedback was a critique of his perfect, explosive execution. During a particularly complex urban rescue simulation, After Naruto pointed out that his victory blast to take out a robot had collapsed a fire escape two civilians were about to use, Bakugo finally snapped. He stormed out of the simulation zone, ignoring the lockdown exercise, and marched up to the observation booth. He shoved the door open, his palms sparking. "What the hell is your problem?" he roared, spittle flying. "You're not a hero. You're not a teacher. You're just some creepy censor freak pointing out shit that doesn't matter. We won the scenario." The booth was quiet. Aizawa watched, sipping coffee, letting it unfold. Naruto turned from the bank of monitors to face the seething boy. "Did you?" Naruto asked, his voice calm. "Check the casualty tally." On the main screen, the exercise's AI scrolled the results. Civilian casualties, 2 simulated deaths, for critical injuries. Cause of death/injury, collateral structural damage. Bakugo stared at the numbers, his face twisting. "They're just sims. The objective was to neutralize the hostiles." "The objective," Naruto said, "was to save people. The hostiles were the obstacle, not the goal. You confuse the two. You often do." Something in Bakugo broke then. Not his pride, that was a fortress, but the lock on a deeper, more volatile emotion. "You think you know anything? You stand up there with your quiet judgment. You faced that crusty-handed freak and just talked. What kind of weak-ass shit is that? Real strength ends fights. Does it?" Naruto stood, not towering over Bakugo, but meeting his furious gaze on equal footing. "Did your strength end the fight at Kyoshi? Did All Might's? The fight ended when they chose to leave. Your strength is a tool, Bakugo. A powerful one. But if the only tool you have is a hammer, you start seeing every problem as a nail. And you start leaving a lot of broken, unnecessary wreckage in your wake. Including yourself." He tapped his own chest. "I know what it's like to have a hammer that feels like it can solve everything. It's a lie. The strongest people I've ever known were the ones who knew when not to swing it." Bakugo's hands clenched, the sparks dying. He was trembling, not with rage now, but with the violent cognitive dissonance of having his core philosophy challenged by someone who couldn't be easily dismissed as weak. Naruto hadn't fought him. He hadn't shown flashy power. He had simply seen, and in seeing, disarmed him. "Go back to the debrief," Aizawa said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Now, Bakugo." Bakugo turned and left, slamming the door behind him. The silence he left was heavier than his shouts. "That was risky," Aizawa remarked. "He could have blown a hole in my booth." "He won't," Naruto said, sitting back down, his eyes returning to the monitors where the other students were milling in confusion. "He's too smart. And he's finally asking himself the question he's been avoiding. If I'm so strong, why does this keep happening? And what's the answer? That he's defining strength wrong. It's a painful answer. It might make him better. Or it might break him. Your educational philosophy is brutally optimistic." Aizawa deadpanned. The quiet war wasn't only within the students. It was in the staff room, in the memos, in the unspoken alliances. Naruto became a litmus test. President Mike, ever the performer, found him baffling and slightly unnerving. Cementos, the stoic, saw a kind of structural integrity in him he respected. Midnight's initial hostility had softened into a wary, intellectual curiosity. She would corner him with questions about the psychology of conflict resolution in pre-modern societies, treating him like a fascinating artifact. And then there was All Might, Yagi. Their encounters were fewer but deeper. They met sometimes at dusk, on a secluded bench overlooking the track and field grounds. No hero, no shinobi. Just 2 broken soldiers sharing the watch. "Young Bakugo is struggling," Yagi said one evening, the sunset painting the sky in bruised purples and golds. "He's waking up," Naruto corrected. "It's a painful process. You of all people should know." Yagi managed a frail smile. "Waking up to the fact that the dream you've dedicated your life to is incomplete. Yes. It is." He coughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Niza tells me you have an understanding. He's using me as a controlled catalyst. I'm using him for a platform. It's a mutually suspicious partnership. It's how most good things start in this system," Yagi said. "From the edges and the gaps." He was silent for a long moment. "I have been thinking about what you said. About the dam. About the pressure." He turned his hollow gaze to Naruto. "The Commission is planning a response to the League. A show of force. A coordinated operation involving top heroes and approved students from the upper years. To demonstrate that the system is not shaken." Naruto went still. "They're putting children on the front line of a retaliatory strike. They are offering field experience under close supervision to the most promising assets." The euphemisms tasted bitter on Yagi's tongue. "It is the old logic. To prove the symbol is unbroken, you must visibly use its tools. And you? I am not invited. My part in this act is over." The admission was quiet, final. I am to remain here. A reassuring totem for the lower years. They're sidelining you, Naruto stated. They are retiring me, Yagi corrected, with no trace of self-pity. Gently. They fear what my visible decline will do to morale. Better a slow fade than a public fall. He looked at his own trembling hands. They are not entirely wrong. Naruto felt a cold anger settle in his gut. And the students going on this operation? The most promising assets? Yagi's voice dropped to a whisper. It will be a small team. Overwhelming force. A surgical strike on a suspected League facility. The intelligence is, supposedly, solid. All Might's successor must be seen as part of the victory. Midoriya. Of course. He's not ready, Naruto said, the words flat. According to the metrics, he is one of the most powerful first years in history. Yagi replied, the ghost of his old, booming voice in the statement. I'm not talking about power. I'm talking about ready. He still sees the world in chapters. He still believes heroes are infallible. Sending him into a live operation against an enemy that has already shown tactical cunning and a willingness to target symbols, it's not training. It's bait. Yagi bowed his head. I have voiced my concerns. They were noted. And overruled. The decision comes from the Commission, with Nizu's reluctant compliance. The narrative must be stabilized. The new generation must be seen stepping forward. Naruto looked out at the darkening fields. A quiet war within a quiet war. The institution, terrified of showing weakness, was preparing to gamble with children's lives to prove its strength. It was the most familiar, most despicable logic in the world. When? He asked. 3 days. Naruto didn't sleep that night. He sat on the floor of his quarters, the biometric band glowing softly on the nightstand where he'd removed it, a permitted action for sleep, the logs would show. He meditated, but not for peace. He cast his senses out, not across distance, but through the fabric of the school itself. He felt the restless energy of the dorms. Bakugo's simmering frustration. Todoroki's silent, frozen conflict. Uraraka's determined anxiety. And Midoriya, a knot of excited terror, of desperate desire to prove himself worthy, mixed with a new, nagging doubt sown by recent conversations. The boy was psyching himself up for a hero's mission, trying to bury the part of him that was still a scared child. Naruto also felt the subtle, background hum of UA's security. The patrol patterns of the security bots. The pressure sensors in the fences. The encrypted data flows. Nizu's watchful, omnipresent systems. He had no intention of breaking his probation. Not directly. But the principal had spoken of adjusting algorithms, of creating seams. At dawn, he went to see Recovery Girl for his scheduled session. As she fussed with her scanners, he spoke casually. The school's security is impressive. Must be a complex system to manage health data, training records, and physical security all in one network. Recovery Girl glanced at him. Nizu designed most of it himself. It's his labyrinth. Why? Just thinking about infrastructure. Where I'm from, we had layered security. The most important things were often protected by seeming like something else. A medical bay, for instance, might have the cleanest data lines isolated from combat networks for safety. She paused, her sharp eyes narrowing behind her glasses. What are you getting at, young man? Nothing, Naruto said, offering a mild smile. Just making conversation. It's interesting how design reflects philosophy. Nizu values life and learning. I imagine his systems prioritize protecting those above all else. Even from well-intentioned mistakes. He left the session soon after. He had planted a seed. Recovery Girl was no fool. She would hear the warning, and the request, in his words. She had access to the most secure, medically prioritized subnetwork. If she chose, she could make certain non-medical data difficult to trace. The next day, during a combined class tactical lecture, Naruto found himself sitting at the back, next to Shoto Todoroki. The boy had, as had become his habit, chosen the seat nearest to Naruto's usual spot. The lecture was on coordinating with sensory-type heroes. Todoroki took meticulous notes, his face impassive. When the lecture ended and the students began to pack up, Todoroki didn't move. He stared at his notebook. They're sending him into a real operation, Todoroki said, his voice so low only Naruto could hear it. It wasn't a question. Naruto didn't ask how he knew. Todoroki was observant, and the upper-class whispers had a way of filtering down. Yes. It's a mistake. Yes. Todoroki finally looked at him, his heterochromatic eyes holding a cold fire. You're going to do something. I'm on probation. Monitored. My options are limited. But not zero. Todoroki's gaze was unsettlingly direct. My father. Endeavor. He lives for these operations. The publicity. The demonstration of force. He will be there. Leading it. The hatred in his voice was a palpable chill. He will use it. To show his superiority. To show his masterpiece is part of the victory. He meant himself, by proxy. You're not going, Naruto stated. No. I am not ready. The word was a curse. But he will spin it. The son of the number one, trained and waiting. The next symbol in the stable. He closed his notebook with a sharp snap. I am tired of being a tool in other people's narratives. It was the most Todoroki had ever said to him. It was an offering. And a request. Naruto considered the boy. The glacier was cracking, not with heat, but with the immense, silent pressure of a soul refusing to be crushed any longer. Sometimes, Naruto said quietly, the most powerful move is to refuse to play the game they've set up for you. To define your own victory. How? By being where you're needed, not where you're pointed. Naruto stood. The system sees in straight lines, point A to point B, villain to prison, student to hero. But real life, it's a web. Sometimes, to protect one point, you have to pull on a thread far away. Todoroki absorbed this, his brow furrowed in thought. You need a thread pulled. I might, Naruto admitted. A very quiet one. Would you be willing to have a conversation with Midoriya? Not about tactics. About fear. About the weight of expectations. About what it means to carry someone else's dream before you've finished building your own. He respects you? He might listen. Todoroki blinked, surprised. It was a human request, not a tactical one. A request for empathy, not power. He gave a slow, single nod. I can do that. It was a small thing. A quiet conversation between two boys who bore the weight of legacy in different, crushing ways. But in the web Naruto was beginning to perceive, it was a vital pull on a thread. Midoriya needed a peer's perspective, not another adult's warning. He needed to know he wasn't alone in his fear. The final piece came from an unexpected source. Later that afternoon, as Naruto walked the perimeter path, he sensed a familiar, prickly presence approaching from behind. He didn't turn. Katsuki Bakugo fell into step beside him, staring straight ahead, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. I've been thinking, Bakugo growled, the words ripped from him as if by pliers. A dangerous pastime, Naruto said mildly. Shut up. That shit you said about the hammer. He was silent for 20 paces. There's an operation. Deck is going. I heard. It's a setup. A publicity stunt. They're using him as a goddamn prop. The venom in Bakugo's voice wasn't directed at Midoriya, for once, but at the faceless. He's gonna get himself killed trying to live up to All Might's shadow in front of the cameras. Probably. Bakugo stopped walking, forcing Naruto to stop and face him. The blonde's red eyes were blazing, but with a focused intensity that had replaced blind rage. You're gonna try to do something from here. Some censor shit. Some quiet thing. Naruto said nothing. I'm going to be in the support and observation team, Bakugo said, his voice dropping. Second-year lead. They think my quirk is good for breaching and flashy containment. They think I'm a good dog who wants the spotlight. He bared his teeth in something that was not a smile. I want to be the best. Not a prop. Not a casualty in a PR war. Tell me what to look for. The shit you see. The cracks. It was as close to a plea for help as Bakugo would ever get. He was offering himself as a vector, a pair of eyes and ears on the inside of the operation. Naruto studied him. This was the gamble. Bakugo was volatile, proud, unpredictable. But he was also brilliant, adaptable, and he had just been handed a profound insult, being used. His anger could now be directed, with precision. The League doesn't fight fair, Naruto said. They use psychology. They exploit symbols. Their last attack was a statement. This operation is the system's answer. The League will be expecting an answer. Look for what's too perfect. Look for the intelligence that seems just a little too convenient. Look for the civilian element that doesn't fit. And watch Midoriya. Not to compete. To protect. Because if they can't break the old symbol, they'll try to break the new one in the cradle. Your pride won't matter if he dies proving a point you both got tricked into. Bakugo absorbed this, his jaw working. He gave a sharp, single nod. Fine. He turned to leave, then paused. You're still a creepy bastard. But you're not, entirely wrong. He stomped away. Naruto watched him go. The quiet war had its pieces on the board now. Recovery Girl, with her access. Todoroki, with his empathy. Bakugo, with his new, directed fury. And Nizu, the chess master, allowing the pieces to move, adjusting the algorithms in the dark. He looked down at the biometric band on his wrist. In 3 days, the system would make its move to reassert control. And he, the unlicensed observer, would have to fight his first real battle in this new world, a battle of perception, of whispers, of pulling the right threads in a web no one else could fully see. He couldn't throw a single punch. He couldn't use a single jutsu. He would have to win by being exactly what they thought he was, a man who saw things. And by using everything they had forgotten, that the people within a system are not just its components, but its potential fractures, and its only hope. Chapter 6. The Threads of the Web. The air in Yui grew taut in the 48 hours preceding the operation. It was a tension felt not in shouts or alarms, but in the spaces between breaths, in the 2 quiet corridors, the sidelong glances between faculty, the forced normalcy of classes that rang hollow. Naruto moved through it like a ghost with a leash, the biometric band a constant, cool weight. His senses, however, were unfettered. He didn't need to leave campus to map the impending storm. He felt it in the jagged, anxious energy radiating from the selected upper-year students as they underwent intensified briefings in sealed rooms. He tasted the metallic tang of fear beneath their excitement. He sensed it in the subdued, worried frequency of Midoriya, a discordant note in the usually vibrant symphony of the dorms. The boy was trying to project confidence, but to Naruto's perception, he was a glass figure under immense pressure, already showing hairline fractures. The quiet war was no longer metaphorical. It was a series of deliberate, invisible actions. His first move was the recovery girl. During his next analysis session, he didn't speak of security or networks. He spoke of trauma. When a body is pushed past its limit, the damage isn't always structural, he said, lying still as her scanners passed over him. It writes itself into the nervous system. The memory of the pain, the instinct to flinch. You can heal the bone, but the ghost of the break remains. Recovery girl hummed, adjusting a dial. Psychosomatic scarring. A well-documented phenomenon in high-stress professions. Why the interest? The students going on this operation, they've been in fights. They've been hurt. But this is different. It's premeditated, state-sanctioned violence. The psychological load will be of a different order. Their bodies might be ready. Their nerves might not be. She peered at him over her glasses. You're suggesting preemptive psychological screening. The Commission's protocols cover fitness for duty, not fear. I'm suggesting that if you monitor their biometrics during the op, heart rate variability, galvanic skin response, adrenal output, you might see the cracks forming before they break. Your medical subnetwork is the most secure, the most isolated from combat data streams. If there's a cascade failure, you'd see it first. Maybe even before the field commander. He let the implication hang. She was silent for a long moment, her old eyes shrewd. She understood. He was giving her a medical justification to covertly monitor the operation's vital signs through her network, a network Nisa had implied had. Seems. And in monitoring, she could potentially see more than just medical data. She could see anomalies in the situation itself. An interesting hypothesis, she said finally, making a note on her chart. Continuously monitoring stress biomarkers in a live scenario could provide valuable data for future trauma mitigation. I'll consider the logistics. It was a yes. His second thread was Todoroki. He found the boy that evening not in the library, but in a rarely used ceramic studio, his hands covered in cool, gray clay. He wasn't sculpting anything recognizable, just methodically kneading and pressing, his face a mask of concentration. It was a somatic exercise, an attempt to ground a turbulent mind. You spoke with him? Naruto asked, leaning in the doorway. Todoroki didn't look up. Yes. He is afraid. Not of the villains. Of failing All Might. Of not being worthy of the power he was given. He pressed a thumb deep into the clay, leaving a perfect, smooth impression. I told him my father gave me power to be his masterpiece. To surpass a symbol. It is a cold gift. All Might gave him power to be a successor. To continue a symbol. It is a warm burden. But both are burdens placed on a child's back before he knows how to stand under them. He finally looked at Naruto, his 2 colored eyes clear. He understood. I think it helped. To know the weight has a name, even if it doesn't make it lighter. It never does, Naruto said. But a shared burden is easier to carry. Thank you. Todoroki gave a slight nod and returned to his clay. The conversation had been a success. Midoriya wouldn't go into the operation feeling entirely alone. It was a psychological stabilizer, a small reinforcement against the pressure that would try to break him. The third and most volatile thread was Bakugo. There was no more direct contact. The explosive blonde had been sequestered with the other support team members, undergoing his own briefings. But Naruto didn't need to speak to him. He had given Bakugo a lens, a way to see the mission not as a glory run, but as a potential trap. Bakugo's intellect, when divorced from his ego, was razor-sharp. He would be looking for the flaws now. He would be a skeptical, angry set of eyes on the inside, and his loyalty, once engaged, was to his own concept of victory, not to the Commission's narrative. That made him a wild card, but a necessary one. On the morning of the operation, the atmosphere crystallized into a brittle quiet. The selected students, a handful of powerful third years, 2 exceptional second years including Bakugo in a support role, and Midoriya, the singular, spotlighted first year, were shepherded onto a nondescript, armored transport vehicle in a secured hangar. There were no cheers, no cameras. This was to be a covert strike, the publicity to come after the victory. Naruto stood with Aizawa and Niza in the main security control room, a cavernous space of glowing screens and silent technicians. They had a legitimate reason to be there. Niza was overseeing campus security during a potential vulnerability, Aizawa was analyzing tactical data for future curriculum, and Naruto was, ostensibly, providing broad-spectrum sensory oversight of the campus perimeter. The biometric band on his wrist gleamed under the screen light. On the main display, a holographic map showed the operations target, a disused pharmaceutical warehouse on the industrial outskirts of Muzurifu. Intelligence indicated it was a League of Villains staging area, a hub for the mysterious Nomu production. The plan was simple, brutal elegance, a simultaneous, multi-angle breach by pro-heroes, Endeavor leading the main thrust, immediate suppression of all hostiles, evidence recovery, and a clean withdrawal. The students were to be positioned in the outer perimeter, handling containment and crowd control, of which there was expected to be none, a safe baptism by fire. The intelligence is almost too clean, Aizawa murmured, his eyes scanning the schematics. Layout, guard rotations, estimated enemy strength. It's all there. As if delivered. The commission's sources have been thoroughly vetted, Niza said, his voice cheerful but his paws moving swiftly across a separate console. He was not just watching the operation, he was running parallel analyses, his own algorithms chewing through the data. Of course, thorough vetting can sometimes miss a double blind. Or a gift. Naruto said nothing. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to listen. Not with his ears, but with the refined, war-trained sense that had once tracked assassins through forest canopies. He filtered out the hum of the control room, the chatter of the techs. He reached out, not across the miles to the warehouse, that was beyond his range, but into the digital and emotional streams flowing from it. He tuned into the encrypted comms feed from the transport. He heard the calm, professional voice of the mission commander, a veteran hero named Grand Horn. He heard the steady breathing of the students, the rustle of their costumes. And he heard, faint but distinct, the rapid, rabbit-quick pulse of Midoriya's heart, a staccato rhythm of fear disguised as adrenaline. Then, he focused on the secondary channel, Recovery Girl's medical monitor, piggybacking on the secure feed. It was a river of data, heart rates, blood pressure, cortisol levels. The upper years were elevated but steady. Bakugo's readings were a spiky, aggressive graph, but within expected parameters for his temperament. Midoriya's graph was different. Not just elevated, but erratic. His cortisol was climbing in sharp, saw-toothed increments. Not the smooth curve of combat readiness, but the jagged line of someone teetering on the brink of a panic attack, fighting it down with sheer will. The ghost of the break was already whispering. Naruto opened his eyes. Midoriya's stress biomarkers are entering the red zone. Pre-operational. He's psyching himself into a crash. Aizawa glanced at a subsidiary screen where the medical data was displayed in a corner, courtesy of Niza's integration. He'll settle once the action starts. It's the waiting that's hard. Or the pressure will fracture him at the first unexpected variable. Naruto countered. He's not a soldier. He's a devotee trying to perform a miracle to please his god. That's a brittle mindset. On the main screen, the transport reached its insertion point. The teams deployed with silent efficiency. Thermal imaging showed the heat signatures of the pro-heroes, Endeavor a blazing star, converging on the warehouse. The student teams took up their perimeter positions. All was quiet. Too quiet. No external sentries, Aizawa noted, his frown deepening. No patrols. For a supposed staging area, it's sterile. Perhaps they are confident in their concealment, Niza mused, but his black eyes were darting across data streams. Or perhaps the stage is empty. The breach happened. A synchronized explosion from Endeavor's team blew the main doors inward. Heroes flooded the warehouse. Chaos erupted on the comms. Main floor clear. No hostiles. Repeat, no hostiles. This is a shell. There's equipment, but it's cold. Abandoned for days. Sir, we're detecting. A new sound cut through the feed, a low, resonant hum that made the control room's speakers vibrate. Then, a voice, synthesized and hollow, echoed through the warehouse and over the comms. Welcome, heroes. To the theater. The holographic map flickered. New heat signatures bloomed around the warehouse, not inside it. Dozens of them, emerging from concealed underground bunkers, from sewer accesses, from the shells of adjacent abandoned buildings. They had the amorphous, chaotic heat profiles of Noma. It was an ambush. The intelligence had been a lure. The warehouse was the bait in the center of a closing jaw. Containment teams, report. Grandhorn's voice was sharp. The student perimeter team's comms crackled to life. Naruto focused on Bakugo's channel. We've got contacts. Multiple bogies, emerging from the ground. They're not human. They're fast. It was a second-year girl's voice, edged with panic. Then Bakugo's voice, a snarling burst of static. Shut up and form up. They're hurting us. Don't let them push you towards the central building. Good. He was seeing it. The trap. But the trap had more layers. The synthesized voice spoke again. We are here for the symbol. The fledgling one. Bring us the green child, and the others may leave. A cold knife twisted in Naruto's gut. They weren't after a military victory. They were after a psychological one. A symbolic capture. They wanted Midoriya. On the comms, Endeavor's roar of fury was audible. Ignore the taunts. Eliminate the creatures. Students, hold your perimeter. But the perimeter was collapsing. The Nomu, while individually less powerful than the ones at the USJ or Kyoshi, were numerous and acting with a disturbing, pack-like coordination. They were applying pressure specifically on the student sectors, testing them, probing. Naruto watched the medical data. Midoriya's vitals had gone eerily calm. The panic had been replaced by a cold, fatalistic resolve. He had heard the demand. He was making a calculation. He's going to do something stupid, Naruto said, his voice low. He's a hero student. It's in the job description. Aizawa muttered, his knuckles white on the console. Not like this. He's going to offer himself. On the screen, they saw it. A small, green-clad figure broke from the established student defensive line. Midoriya, using a burst of full cowling, shot not towards safety, but on a curving path that would take him between two converging groups of Nomu, drawing their attention. Deku, you idiot! Get back in formation! Bakugo's scream ripped through the comms. But Midoriya was broadcasting on an open channel, his voice trembling but clear. If you want me, then stop attacking my friends. I'm here. It was the move of a martyr. Of a boy who believed the symbol was more important than the person wearing it. The Nomu shifted. Their coordination broke for a moment, their focus swinging towards the solitary, tempting target. The synthesized voice chuckled. The lamb walks to the altar. How predictable. Now! Bakugo's voice, not a scream, but a feral command. Alpha team, suppressive fire on the left cluster. Beta on the right. Pin them down. I'm getting the dumbass. He didn't wait for confirmation. A massive explosion lit up the thermal imaging as Bakugo launched himself not at the Nomu, but on an intercept trajectory with Midoriya. He was ignoring the battle plan, ignoring the chain of command, acting on the imperative Naruto had given him, protect the new symbol. Chaos escalated. The pros, now realizing the student perimeter was breaking, tried to disengage from the empty warehouse to assist, but more Nomu emerged, these ones larger, more powerful, to delay them. Endeavor was a whirlwind of flame, but he was being bogged down. The operation was a fractal disaster. Naruto's mind raced. The threads were pulling, but the web was tearing. Midoriya was in the open. Bakugo was going to get himself killed trying to reach him. The pros were pinned. He looked at the biometric band on his wrist. It was monitoring him. If he used a significant amount of chakra, it would flag an anomalous energy emission. It might even trigger an automatic suppressant. But he wasn't on the battlefield. He was in a control room, miles away. He closed his eyes again. He couldn't send chakra. But chakra was not just energy, it was a medium of connection, of perception. And in Sage mode, that perception could become a form of communication, a sharing of intent, of sight. He had not used Sage mode since arriving here. The natural energy of this world was different, thinner, harder to balance. It was a risk. But it was the only thread he had left. He took a slow, deep breath, settling into the near-forgotten rhythm. He reached out, not for power, but for the stillness at the heart of natural energy. He felt the feeble trickle of this world's sage energy, like trying to draw water from a nearly dry well. It was unstable, flickering. But it was enough. He focused his sage-enhanced senses on the chaotic emotional maelstrom of the battlefield. He found the two bright, desperate points of consciousness he needed, Midoriya's drowning guilt and determination, and Bakugo's furious, protective focus. He couldn't send words. He couldn't send chakra. But in the briefest, most fragile instant of sage perception, he could send an image. A snapshot of understanding. To Midoriya, he projected not a reprimand, but a memory, his own younger self, standing alone against pain, believing he had to bear the world's hatred alone. And then the feeling of hands on his back, of a village believing in him, of the understanding that a symbol is nothing without the people who choose to uphold it. You are not alone. Your strength is not for sacrifice. It is for connection. To Bakugo, he sent a different image, a tactical layout seen from above. Not of the Nomu, but of the pattern. The way the creatures were herding, creating a funnel. The weak point wasn't in front of Midoriya. It was in the overextension of the Nomu on the right flank, where their coordination was thinnest. A path, not to Midoriya, but through the enemy to create a new, defensible position. See the board. Not the piece. The effort lasted less than a second. A spike of pain lanced through Naruto's temples. The unnatural sage energy recoiled, and he broke the connection, sagging against the console. A warning chime sounded from his biometric band, elevated neural activity. Possible migraine episode. It had registered the strain as a medical event, not an energy emission. Nizu's adjusted algorithms had worked. On the battlefield, two things happened simultaneously. Midoriya, mid-sprint towards the waiting Nomu, stumbled. The overwhelming, foreign sense of not aloneness, of a burden shared across impossible distance, shattered his martyr's resolve. He skidded to a halt, not in surrender, but in confusion. His head whipped around, looking for the source of the feeling he couldn't name. Bakugo, rocketing through the air, saw it. He didn't get a mystical vision. He got a sudden, crystal-clear intuitive understanding of the battlefield geometry. He saw the funnel, the weak flank. He altered his course mid-explosion, not towards Midoriya, but towards the right side Nomu cluster. He unleashed a blistering, focused series of AP shots not to kill, but to disrupt, to scatter. Deka! Vector 3! Now! He roared. Midoriya, acting on instinct and the echo of that strange feeling, obeyed. He turned and shot towards the opening Bakugo had created. They met not in the kill zone, but in a pocket of momentarily cleared ground back to back. What the hell was that, you moron? Bakugo snarled, but he was already scanning for the next move. I don't know. Midoriya panted, his voice raw. But thanks. The trap had been sprung, but the prize had not been taken. The ambush was now a grinding, messy battle. The pros, seeing the students weren't immediately overwhelmed, rallied. Endeavor finally broke through the delaying forces and unleashed a hellstorm that cleared a path for extraction. The order came over the comms. All units! Disengage and retreat! This is a full withdrawal! It was not a victory. It was a salvage operation. The heroes pulled back, covering the students as they extracted under heavy fire. No one died. But several were injured. The warehouse was, as suspected, empty. The League had vanished, their point made, they could outthink the system, they could bait its symbols, and they could walk away unscathed. In the control room, the silence was deafening. The screen showed the retreating heat signatures, the abandoned battlefield. The synthesized voice had laughed one last time before cutting off. Nizu slowly put down his datapad. Casualties minimal. Objectives 0 achieved. Strategic outcome, a profound demonstration of enemy tactical superiority and our own institutional predictability. He looked at Naruto, his black eyes unreadable. And 2 first-year students, against all odds and protocol, survived a focused enemy trap due to remarkably adaptive decision-making. Aizawa rubbed his eyes, looking decades older. They'll call it a success because we didn't lose anyone. They'll spin it as a hardening experience. They'll promote Bakugo for independent initiative and Midoriya for courage under fire. They'll learn all the wrong lessons. Naruto straightened, the pain in his head a dull throb. The biometric band felt heavier than ever. He had pulled every thread. He had bent every rule. He had risked exposure. And for what? To avert a catastrophe, not to win a battle. The quiet war had just seen its first major engagement. The system had been outmaneuvered. The children had been saved, but not by the system. They had been saved by its cracks, by the threads woven in the dark. And Naruto knew, with a cold certainty, that the Commission would now see those cracks not as flaws to be repaired, but as threats to be eliminated. The leash would tighten. The watch would become a siege. He had won the moment. But he had just escalated the war. Chapter 7: The Siege of the Symbol. The aftermath of the failed operation, officially termed Operation Hardened Resolve, did not arrive as a thunderclap, but as a slow, pervasive chill that seeped into the foundations of UA. The public story was a masterclass in narrative management. Pro-heroes successfully disrupt Major League of Villains facility, no casualties in daring student-assisted raid. The footage released was carefully edited, Endeavor's fiery breakthrough, a blurry shot of Bakugo's explosions creating a diversion. Midoriya standing resolute amidst smoke. The ambush, the trap, the synthesized voice demanding a child, all excised. The narrative was one of controlled aggression, of the new generation being blooded, in a safe, successful environment. Inside UA, no one was fooled. Naruto felt the change first in the tightening of his own constraints. The biometric band's monitoring became more granular. His permitted zones on campus shrank. His quirk analysis, sessions with Recovery Girl were now observed by a silent commission technician who recorded every question and answer. The seams Nisa had opened were being stitched shut with bureaucratic thread. The students bore the invisible weight differently. Midoriya moved through the days with a shell-shocked quiet, the fervent light in his eyes dimmed by a new, profound uncertainty. He had offered himself as a sacrifice and had been saved by a comrade's rage and a phantom feeling of connection he couldn't explain. It had shaken his worldview to its core. He sought out all might less for training and more for silent company, as if trying to reconcile the broken man with the invincible symbol. Bakugo's fury had been refined into a cold, directed intensity. He had been praised for his decisive action, but the praise felt like ash in his mouth. He had seen the machine's gears grind, had felt its intent to use him and his rival as pawns. His explosions in training became quieter, more precise, but his eyes held a new, calculating sharpness. He watched the teachers, the commission liaisons, with the distrust of a wolf that has seen the fence for what it is, a cage. The true siege, however, began not with Naruto or the students, but with the symbol of peace himself. 3 days after the operation, All Might, Yagi Tashinori, was summoned to a closed-door hearing with the Hero Public Safety Commission's Oversight Board. Naruto learned of it not through official channels, but through the grim set of Aizawa's shoulders and the way Nisa's ever-present cheer became brittle, like porcelain under stress. That evening, Yagi did not return to the teachers' dormitories. He was admitted directly to UA's high-security infirmary wing. The official line was, "Complications from prior injuries exacerbated by the stress of recent events." The truth, which Recovery Girl imparted to Naruto during a monitored session with a gaze that spoke volumes, was more brutal. "They didn't ask him to retire," she said softly, adjusting a dial on a machine with more force than necessary. The commission technician watched from the corner. "They informed him. His teaching license is under indefinite review. His access to sensitive materials, including certain student records, has been revoked. He is to remain on campus, in a restorative capacity, but his active role in shaping the next generation is concluded." She met Naruto's eyes. The pressure of the hearing triggered a pulmonary event. "He is stable. But he is a ghost in his own life now." The system, threatened by the cracking of its primary symbol, had moved to formally decommission him. To make the fate official, controlled, and silent. The message was clear: if the symbol could not be maintained, it would be carefully dismantled and placed on a shelf, lest its broken state demoralize the troops. Naruto requested, and to his surprise was granted, permission to visit. The permission came with conditions. The visit was to be no longer than 15 minutes, monitored by audio, video was deemed a privacy step too far, and a security officer would be posted outside. Yagi's room was a sterile cube, more cell than hospital suite. The man was propped up on pillows, dwarfed by the bed, an oxygen cannula under his nose. The vibrant gold of his hair seemed faded, the blue of his eyes washed out. But when Naruto entered, those eyes focused with a startling, undimmed clarity. "Ah, young Uzumaki," Yagi whispered, his voice a papery rustle. "Come to see the remains of the dam?" Naruto pulled a chair close, ignoring the faint red light of the audio monitor on the ceiling. "I came to see a man who carried the world for longer than anyone should have to." Yagi's smile was a fragile thing. "And now the world has decided it no longer needs the carrier. Only the idea. And it is searching for a new, sturdier back to bear it." He coughed, a wet, shallow sound. "They will accelerate young Midoriya's training. They will push him into more controlled, public scenarios. They will sand down his rough edges, his empathy, his doubt, his tendency to see villains as people, and polish him into a brighter, simpler symbol. One that is easier to manage." "He'll break," Naruto said, the words not a prediction but a certainty. "Or he will bend until he is no longer the boy I chose." Yagi agreed, pain etching his features. "I wanted to give him a torch to carry. They want to make him into a lighthouse, immobile, glaring, a tool for navigation that has no say in its own light." He turned his head with effort. "You interfered. During the operation. I felt it. A ripple. Not a quirk. Something else." Naruto didn't deny it. In this sterile room, under electronic surveillance, pretense felt like an insult. "I showed him he wasn't alone. I showed Bakugo the shape of the trap. It was all I could do from here." "You used a power they cannot quantify on a battlefield they controlled. That makes you more dangerous to them than Shigaraki." Yagi's gaze was piercing. "They will not try to recruit you. They will try to neutralize you. You are a variable their models cannot process." "I'm aware. You should leave." The advice was given not with fear, but with a strategist's cold assessment. "This school, this system, it will digest you. It will turn your insights into risk assessment reports, your compassion into a psychiatric profile. It will either break you or make you a part of its machinery. You cannot win a war of attrition against an institution that has forgotten more about grinding down dissent than you will ever learn." Naruto was silent for a moment, listening to the soft hiss of the oxygen. I made a promise. To protect the children from being consumed. Leaving would break that promise. You cannot protect them from the world they were born into, Yagi said, a profound sadness in his eyes. You can only give them the tools to survive it. And sometimes, the most important tool is the knowledge of when to walk away from a fight you cannot win. There's always a way, Naruto said, but the words lacked his usual conviction. He was tired. The sage energy backlash still echoed in his bones, and the walls here felt closer than they had a week ago. Is there? Yagi asked softly. You come from a world of wars, do you not? Did you ever truly win? Or did you just create a peace fragile enough for the next generation to inherit the same cycles? The question struck with the force of a physical blow. It was the unspoken fear that had haunted Naruto since his arrival. That hero society and the shinobi world were not opposites, but reflections in a twisted mirror. Both built on the sacrifice of the young, both justifying violence with tradition and necessity. Before he could formulate an answer, the door clicked open. The security officer stepped in. Time's up. Naruto stood. He placed a hand on Yagi's bony shoulder, feeling the bird-like fragility beneath the hospital gown. Rest. The fight isn't over. It's just changing shape. Yagi's hand came up, gripping Naruto's wrist with surprising strength. Be careful, Uzumaki. They fear what they don't understand. And they have just decided they no longer understand me. The message was clear. If they could sideline All Might, they would not hesitate to destroy an unlicensed, unknown variable. The siege intensified the next day. It began with a formal summons to Principal Nisa's office, not for tea, but for a meeting with the Commission's newly appointed UA liaison for unconventional threats, a woman named Akane Himura. She was in her 50s, with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes the color of a winter sky. She wore a tailored suit, not a hero costume, and she carried an air of absolute, unassailable authority. Nisa sat behind his desk, his paws folded, his expression unreadably pleasant. Himura stood by the window, looking out over the campus as if it were a spreadsheet. Uzumaki, she began without preamble, turning to face him. Your probationary period is being re-evaluated. The data from Operation Hardened Resolve has raised anomalies. What anomalies? Naruto asked, his tone neutral. Biometric spikes coinciding with reported battlefield intuitions from students Bakugo Katsuki and Midoriya Izuku. Inexplicable stress mitigation in subject Midoriya prior to a critical decision point. Sensor logs from your monitoring band indicate unusual neural activity patterns at the same timestamp. She took a step forward. Correlation is not causation. But in security matters, we treat coincidence as a threat until proven otherwise. Explain the correlation. Naruto met her gaze. You have my explanations from my sessions with Recovery Girl. I have a sensory-type meta-ability. I was monitoring the situation from here. Stress and intuition are linked. Perhaps I sensed their distress and it caused my own neural reaction. Perhaps it was a migraine, as the logs suggest. Perhaps. She didn't blink. We will be installing additional monitoring equipment in your quarters. Full-spectrum environmental sensors. We will also be conducting a deep pattern analysis of all your interactions with students and staff since your arrival. Nisa finally spoke, his voice light. That is a significant investment of resources, Liaison Himura. Might it not be more productive to utilize Uzumaki's demonstrated observational skills in a more structured? The decision is made, Principal. Himura cut him off. Uzumaki is a classified potential threat. His integration has failed to produce net positive security outcomes. From this point forward, he is to have zero unsanctioned contact with any student. His movements will be confined to his quarters, the infirmary for sessions, and directly to and from those locations via pre-approved routes. His access to tactical feeds and training observations is hereby revoked. It was house arrest. The noose was tightening. And if I refuse? Naruto asked, though he knew the answer. Then your probation is void. You will be remanded to commission custody for indefinite containment and study under the Metability Hazard Act, Clause 7b. A thin smile touched her lips. The clause pertaining to unlicensed, non-cooperative individuals with capabilities that defy standard classification. It is a flexible clause. It was a threat wrapped in legal parchment. They would make him a lab rat. I understand, Naruto said. Good. She turned to Nizu. The new protocols are effective immediately. I trust you will ensure UA's full cooperation. UA always cooperates with the lawful authorities, Nizu said, his cheer now visibly strained at the edges. Himura left, her heels clicking a precise rhythm on the floor. The door shut, leaving Naruto alone with the principal. Nizu's facade dropped. He slumped slightly in his large chair, looking suddenly very small and very tired. I am sorry, Uzumaki. My influence has its limits. The failure of the operation, the public perception of instability, it has empowered the hardliners. Himura represents a faction that believes safety is achieved through absolute control, not through understanding. They're scared, Naruto said. Terrified, Niza corrected. And a terrified institution is a dangerous beast. It will lash out at anything that moves unpredictably. He looked at Naruto, his black eyes serious. Yagi's advice, while extreme, is not without merit. There are avenues for disappearance. I have facilitated them before, for those the system could not tolerate but did not deserve to be broken. An offer of escape. A final, secret thread. Naruto looked out the window, at the sprawling, beautiful campus that was now his gilded cage. He saw ground beta in the distance. He thought of Midoriya's fractured resolve, of Bakugo's cold fury, of Todoroki's silent war. He thought of the fear in the eyes of the other students who had begun to sense the rot beneath the gleaming surface. Leaving would be safe. It would be smart. It was what a shinobi trained in survival would do: retreat, regroup, live to fight another day. But he hadn't come here as a shinobi. He had come as a man who had seen the end result of cycles of sacrifice. And he had made a promise. No, he said, turning back to Niza. If I leave, I confirm their fear. I become a phantom, a story they can use to justify more control, more fear. And the children, they'll see another adult who saw the truth and chose to run. They need to see someone stand. Niza studied him for a long moment. Standing may mean falling. I've fallen before, Naruto said. The trick is in how you get back up. And what you bring with you. A flicker of something like respect crossed Niza's face. Then we must be very clever. The siege is not just on you. It is on the very idea you represent. They will try to discredit you. To isolate you. To provoke you into an action that justifies their worst measures. I know. Good. Then you also know that from this moment, every move is observed. Every breath is measured. You are no longer a catalyst. You are a specimen under the sharpest lens they possess. Niza's paws began to tap across his keyboard. But even the sharpest lens has a blind spot. The place where the observer stands. Remember that. It was cryptic, but Naruto understood. The surveillance was a weapon, but it was also a fact. To fight it directly was to lose. He had to operate within its reality, to use its very presence as a tool. He was escorted back to his quarters by 2 silent security androids. The room, once sparse, now hummed with new, discreetly placed sensors. He could feel their faint electronic pulses in the air. He sat on the floor in the center of the room, in full view of a panoramic camera, and closed his eyes. He did not meditate. He planned. They wanted a variable? They would get one. But not the kind they expected. He would not use chakra. He would not break a single rule. He would be the perfect, compliant prisoner. And in his perfect compliance, he would show them the one thing their system was designed to ignore, the humanity it was grinding into dust. He would be a mirror. And he would make sure that everyone, the students, the teachers, even the guards, had to look into it. The siege of the symbol had begun. But Naruto Uzumaki had spent his life being under siege. He knew how walls worked. And he knew that sometimes, the most powerful attack was not to break them down, but to show everyone the faces of those imprisoned inside.